At my husband's 100 billion signing ceremony, I projected his infidelity photos. My husband was in the spotlight at the 100 billion signing ceremony, with everyone saying I became the president's wife only because of him. However, no one knew that the surveillance in his office was connected to my phone. At this moment, on the screen, he and his mistress were rolling on the wedding bed I bought. I smiled and pressed the remote control. The large screen in the banquet hall suddenly switched to the real-time explicit scene. His face turned ashen as he roared at me, "Are you crazy? This will ruin me." I shook the financial evidence in my other hand. "Darling, this is what true ruin looks like." The spotlights poured over Charles like scalding gold dust. He stood at the front of the banquet hall, his tailored suit outlining the silhouette of a successful man, every pore seemingly glowing. Below the stage was a dense crowd, with reporters' cameras focused on his face, flashbulbs firing in succession, weaving a dazzling web of light. He slightly raised his hand, and a simple gesture elicited waves of applause. On the massive LED backdrop, the bright red words "Fengrue Group 100 Billion Strategic Cooperation Signing Ceremony" stood like a giant medal, proclaiming his current pinnacle. Today marks a crucial step for Fengrue toward the future. Charles's voice, clear and confident, resonated through the microphone with a magnetic control, echoing under the dome and igniting another round of even more enthusiastic applause. I, Lynn, sat in the first row of the VIP seats below the stage, in an excellent position that allowed me to take in his triumphant profile on stage and the admiring expressions of everyone below. The air was filled with the faint intoxication of champagne, the richness of expensive perfumes, and a halo known as the president's wife. Occasionally, glances swept over, carrying subtle envy or speculation, silently conveying a consensus: "Look, that's Charles's wife, Lynn, her glory is entirely tied to that man at the pinnacle." I picked up the clear champagne glass in front of me, cold droplets seeping into my fingertips. The glass wall reflected my blurred shadow, with a perfectly timed smile on my lips, befitting a president's wife. No one knew that my other hand, hanging by my side, was tightly gripping my phone, my palm sticky and cold, with the screen lit up. It was divided into 4 clear views, showing Charles's top-floor office at Fengrue Group with its excellent view, and the connected rest suite. Every corner was vividly detailed. At this moment, the largest view was of the spacious, luxurious wedding bed in the rest room. The snow-white sheets were disheveled. Charles's body covered a young, fair-skinned girl, like an insatiable beast. His familiar panting, carrying a nauseating urgency, faintly spilled from the phone speaker like a cold venomous snake coiling around my eardrums. The girl's face was buried in the pillow, emitting muffled moans, her long curls spread out like seaweed. This bed was personally selected by me. Every detail, from the custom Italian solid wood frame to the top-grade Egyptian cotton bedding, was imbued with my full imagination and investment in the word home. It once carried my aspirations and body heat, but now it had become the hotbed for their filthy desires. A churn in my stomach prompted me to gulp down a large sip of champagne. The cool liquid slid down, not suppressing the burning sensation but instead igniting it like gasoline on a hidden flame. On stage, Charles's speech reached its climax, as he waved his arms triumphantly. "The strong alliance with Huanyu Group will open an unprecedented new chapter for Fengrue. This is strength, and even more so, trust." His voice was resonant and infectious, as if he were truly a strategic, impeccable business leader. On the phone screen, on my wedding bed, the action was intense. Charles's movements carried a nearly brutal possessiveness, starkly contrasting the elegant elite image he displayed on stage. The split was like 2 worlds. The intense visual impact made my fingertips tremble uncontrollably. 3 days ago. This scene, like a persistent ulcer, was unexpectedly nailed into my view that day. That afternoon, I went to the company to deliver an important document he left at home. His office door was tightly closed, and Secretary Amy blocked me with a strange expression, saying Charles was in an important video conference and had instructed not to be disturbed. I nodded and turned to his exclusive restroom next door, planning to leave the document there and wait. The door was ajar. The moment I pushed it open, the air seemed to freeze. A pungent perfume mixed with the scent of desire assaulted me. Expensive suit jackets and women's stockings were scattered on the floor. My gaze passed the disheveled sofa and landed on the large bed inside. Charles, shirtless, was pinning a young girl in the company's finance department uniform firmly onto my wedding bed. The girl's face was mostly blocked by Charles's body, revealing only a head of meticulously styled chestnut curls. Charles's breathing was heavy, his movements carrying a familiar yet now grotesquely barbaric force. Blood rushed to my head instantly, then froze into ice the next second. I stiffened in place, as if struck by an invisible hammer, my breathing halted. The world's sounds were vacuumed out, leaving only the nauseating pants and the subtle groans of the mattress springs under strain. I didn't know how long it lasted, perhaps seconds, perhaps minutes. I retreated silently like a ghost, gently closing the door. My movements were so light they didn't disturb the battle inside at all. I didn't even leave immediately. Like a masochist, I sat on the cold leather sofa in his outer office, my fingers neurotically swiping the phone screen. My fingertips were cold, with subtle, uncontrollable tremors, as I opened the long-dormant security monitoring app that I had personally paid for and installed with the highest permissions. The clear footage jumped out instantly. The angles were precise, with no obstructions. This time, I clearly saw the girl's face, Vivi, the newly recruited assistant in the finance department, fresh out of graduation, with crescent eyes when smiling, appearing harmless. At this moment, that young face was filled with twisted desire. Even more glaring was Charles's expression. It was a pure indulgence in carnal pleasure, carrying a smug mastery over prey. There was not a shred of guilt, only complete immersion and enjoyment. As if the woman pinned beneath him, defiling our wedding bed, was merely an expensive toy, and the despondent wife outside the door was even less than insignificant dust. The phone screen's light eerily reflected my pallid face. My stomach churned violently, a thick rusty taste surging in my throat. I bit my lower lip hard until I tasted a hint of salty sweetness, barely suppressing the vomit nearly bursting from my throat. In that moment, something supporting me completely collapsed. What followed was not heart-wrenching sobs, but a suffocating silence sinking to the bottom of an icy lake. Hatred, like black vines, wildly grew from the cold lake bottom, entangling every nerve. The piercing feedback from the stage microphone sharply pulled me back to the opulent banquet hall. Charles's speech finally ended. Triumphant, like a king surveying his domain, his gaze swept below the stage, finally landing on me for a moment. In that look, there was deliberate appeasement, smug control, and even a subtle warning. As if saying, "Look, this is your place, sit obediently." Host Ryan's enthusiastic voice rang out, "Next is the most important part of this signing ceremony. Please welcome Fengrue Group President Mr. Charles and Huanyu Group CEO Mr. Zachary to jointly sign this 100 billion strategic cooperation agreement. Let us witness this historic moment together." Uplifting music blared like a victory horn. The follow spots precisely locked onto Charles and the silver-haired, dignified Mr. Zachary from Huanyu. Etiquette ladies in vibrant kipeos gracefully ascended the stage carrying trays lined with red velvet, on which two gold-embossed contracts gleamed enticingly under the lights. The atmosphere in the entire banquet hall reached boiling point. Everyone stood up, craning their necks, phone cameras aimed at the stage, fearing to miss this historic scene. Applause, cheers, and camera shutters converged into a tumultuous ocean, nearly lifting the roof. Charles, flushed with success, picked up the signing pen from the tray, elegantly removed the cap, the shiny tip hovering above the contract signature line, ready to make that invaluable stroke. He turned his head, flashing Mr. Zachary a perfect, determined smile. Now was the moment. I set down the champagne glass nearly crushed in my grip. My cold fingertips swiped the phone screen, opening a hidden, unmarked black icon. The interface was simple, with only a prominent red button labeled Sentio Main Display in small text. My heart pounded heavily in my chest, thump after thump, striking my ribs. The rushing blood drowned out all the on-site clamor. Yet my hand holding the phone was unusually steady. The hatred bred in the icy lake depths over 3 days, the humiliations of betrayal, exploitation, and dismissal, now solidified into a cold, pure execution. I lifted my head, my gaze piercing the crowd, precisely landing on the massive LED main screen behind the stage, currently broadcasting the signing event live. Then, my fingertip gently descended, pressing the cold red button. Time seemed to switch to slow motion. The uplifting music still flowed, host Ryan's voice echoed, and the admiring, excited faces below remained frozen in the previous second's anticipation. But the massive main screen, that banner representing Charles's supreme glory, suddenly flickered. Immediately after, the scene changed. Suffocatingly clear footage instantly replaced the festive signing background. It was the scene I had watched for 3 days, branded into my mind. On the disheveled large bed in the restroom, Charles and Vivi's intensely entangled figures, enlarged to an unavoidable scale, starkly presented before everyone. Charles's heavy panting and Vivi's coquettish moans were amplified unreservedly by the banquet hall's top-tier sound system, instantly overpowering all on-site sounds. Time froze. The air was drained. The banquet hall, boiling and clamorous a second ago, instantly fell into dead silence. Absolute, pin-drop, suffocating silence. All gazes, as if pulled by invisible strings, uniformly turned with incredulous horror toward the massive screen playing the explicit scene. Immediately, countless gazes, as if scalded, sharply turned to the man on stage still holding the pen in signing pose. Charles's smile froze solid, as if flash-frozen. It was an extremely complex expression, mixing extreme shock, bewilderment, disbelief, then swiftly engulfed by overwhelming fear and shame. His hand holding the signing pen trembled violently, the tip scratching an ugly ink mark on the contract. He subconsciously jerked his head up toward the giant screen, pupils contracting to the extreme, as if seeing hell. Ah! A short, sharp woman's scream pierced the silence. It was Vivi. Though her face was partially obscured in the footage, the voice was highly recognizable. This scream was like a drop of water in boiling oil. The dead-silent banquet hall exploded with a boom. Gasps of astonishment, incredulous exclamations, mixed with suppressed chuckles and schadenfreude discussions, swept the space like a hurricane. Reporters frantically snapped at the giant screen and the dazed Charles on stage, flashes connecting into a frenzy even more intense than before. Huanyu's Mr. Zachary, face ashen, stepped back sharply as if fearing contamination, his eyes filled with shock and contempt. His executives quickly stepped forward to shield him, the scene chaotic. Charles stood rigid like a statue struck by lightning. His face drained of color, pale as paper, forehead instantly beaded with large cold sweat drops reflecting greasy light under the spotlights. His pen-holding hand shook like autumn leaves in the wind, the contract bearing 100 billion dreams rustling between his fingers. After a few seconds of blankness, he finally regained a shred of shattered awareness from the massive shock. He flung the expensive signing pen, which smashed onto the stage with a piercing sound. Like a thoroughly enraged, cornered beast, his bloodshot eyes wildly scanned the chaotic crowd below, carrying a predatory fury. His gaze, like poison-quenched arrows, pierced the chaotic crowd, precisely and deadly nailing onto me. I still sat in the first row, that conspicuous VIP seat. The surrounding screams, chaos, and flashes seemed to blur into background. I calmly met his eyes burning with fear and rage, even slowly and clearly flashing him a smile. A bone-chilling, temperatureless smile. This smile ignited his remaining sanity completely. Lynn. A hoarse, extremely furious roar, like a wounded beast's dying howl, tore through the on-site clamor and smashed toward me. He lunged forward a step, seemingly intent on pouncing off the stage regardless, but was firmly blocked by his reacting assistants and bodyguards. He struggled fiercely, his expensive suit deformed, tie askew, hair disheveled, poise utterly lost. Across the surging heads, he glared deadly at me, eyes nearly bulging, voice completely distorted by extreme anger and fear. "Are you insane? You madwoman. Do you know what you're doing? This will ruin me. Ruin everything." Every word squeezed out like blood foam from gritted teeth. Ruin him? The icy lake surface in my heart cracked with a nearly cruel ripple. Can't handle this already? I slowly and elegantly rose from my seat. The spotlights were already chaotically sweeping, but at this moment, it seemed another invisible beam shone on me. I straightened my back, the icy smile still on my face, my gaze calmly piercing the chaotic scene, steadily landing on his rage-twisted face. Under countless shocked, probing, gloating gazes, I slowly raised my left hand. There, gripped not the phone, but a small, metallic silver USB drive. Under the banquet hall's shifting lights, it flickered with cold, restrained sheen, like a tiny, lethal bullet. I gently shook the USB drive, the motion small yet carrying a strange, commanding rhythm. My voice wasn't loud, even nearly gentle and calm, yet it strangely pierced the on-site clamor, clearly directed at the man on stage nearing collapse. Darling, my voice like ice-quenched silk, projecting that kind of thing. I paused, my gaze sweeping his ghostly pale face, the massive screen still silently playing their ugliness, finally returning to his fear-filled eyes. This is what ruin truly means. The USB's cold edges pressed my palm, inside were detailed records and forged vouchers of Charles personally signing off on embezzling tens of millions in group funds to buy Vivi properties, luxury cars, and items, ironclad proof of him hollowing company profits via related party transactions, enough to nail him permanently to the pillar of commercial crime shame, the final verdict. The true destruction had just begun. The cold USB slightly shook between my fingers, its metallic sheen dancing in the shifting lights, like a beating heart or a primed bullet. It projected not light, but the suddenly deepening despair on Charles's face, like a drowning man's. You. Strange gurgling sounds came from his throat, as if choked by an invisible hand, struggling to squeeze out broken syllables. No, impossible, fake. All fake. He sharply turned to the ashen-faced Mr. Zachary from Huanyu, nearly storming off, extending a trembling hand like grasping the last straw. Mr. Zachary. Mr. Zachary, listen to my explanation. This is slander. It's this madwoman. She hates me. She forged it. Mr. Zachary sharply flung off his extended hand, the motion disgusted as if brushing off filth. The elder's sharp gaze swept the giant screen still silently playing the indecent scene, then back to Charles's face thoroughly twisted by fear and shame, finally fixing on the USB I held up. He said nothing, only emitting a very light yet audible cold snort from his nose that the entire silent hall could hear. That sound, laden with contempt and disappointment, slapped Charles's face like an invisible palm. We at Huanyu, Mr. Zachary's voice not loud but carrying undeniable authority, clearly suppressed the on-site buzzing discussions, only partner with honest, self-disciplined entities. Today's signing is cancelled. My lawyers will contact your company for all subsequent legal consequences. He didn't glance at Charles again, saying gravely to his executives and bodyguards, we're leaving. Mr. Zachary. Mr. Zachary. You can't do this. It's a trap. Charles panicked completely, disregarding image to chase, but was unceremoniously blocked by Huanyu's burly bodyguards. He staggered, his expensive leather shoes stepping on the scattered contract papers, leaving dirty prints. That 100 billion new chapter now became trash trampled under his feet. Stop him. My voice, not loud but clearly broadcast through the microphone, somehow, host Ryan's microphone was now in my hand. My gaze swept to several security-uniformed individuals stateside, whom I had privately bribed heavily and held leverage over. Protect Mr. Zachary's safe departure. Additionally, Mr. Charles is suspected of serious economic crimes. Ensure he remains on site until police arrive, going nowhere. Those security officers immediately acted, professionally parting the chaotic crowd, escorting Mr. Zachary's group out quickly, while two flanked and clamped Charles like iron vices, controlling his struggles. Lynn. You venomous bitch. You'll die horribly. Charles, arms twisted behind, immobile, could only roar like a defanged beast with the most vicious words, spittle flying, no way. Those things, how could you get them? All fake. Fake. His wild barks drowned in the greater on-site chaos. Reporters went utterly mad, cameras nearly shoving into my and Charles's faces. Countless questions hailed like ice, Ms. Lynn. What's on the USB in your hand? Mr. Charles. Your response to the infidelity and suspected economic crimes? Ms. Lin, how long have you planned this? For revenge? Fingerway Group stock is plummeting. Your thoughts? Flashes connected into blinding white light, nearly engulfing people. I ignored those clamorous questions. My gaze pierced the chaos, precisely capturing a familiar figure, Vivi. She had somehow blended into the crowd's edge, face ghostly pale, body shaking like a leaf in the wind, trying to shield her face with her bag, shrinking toward the door like a startled mouse. Clearly, the live broadcast on the giant screen and the sudden turn had utterly crushed her. Ms. Vivi, my voice rang clearly through the microphone, with a cat-and-mouse composure, leaving so hastily? Where's the joy when you signed for that Riverside penthouse and Maserati sports car? Mr. Charles hasn't properly thanked you for your contributions yet. I deliberately emphasized contributions, eliciting ambiguous low laughs and more lens turns. Vivi, as if spellbound, stiffened sharply in place. She lifted her head in terror, meeting my gaze, lips trembling, unable to utter a word. Immense fear nearly made her collapse, subconsciously supported by onlookers nearby. Oh, right, as if just remembering, my tone casual yet each word heart-piercing, forgot to remind you. That $5 million bonus under Fingerway Group's finance department special project account, and the sudden shell company flows under your mother's name are all here. I shook the small USB again, silver flashing, rest assured, soon professionals will visit you and your mother. Vivi's eyes completely glazed over, emitting a short whimper, body going limp, truly fainting, clumsily supported by people nearby. The scene erupted in uproar and mad flashes again. Lin. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Witnessing Vivi's collapse, Charles's eyes bulged in rage, struggling with force nearly overturning the two burly security officers. His gaze toward me was poison-quenched hatred, no trace of past feigned affection, only naked madness for mutual destruction. At that moment, the banquet hall's heavy doors were flung open. Police. Make way. Several uniformed officers entered gravely, the leading middle-aged officer Grant's gaze eagle-sharp, scanning the room and finally landing on me and Charles. The scene quieted considerably, leaving only reporters' irrepressible shudders. I stepped forward proactively, steadily handing the silver USB to Officer Grant, voice clear and calm. Officer Grant, I am Lin. I report in real name Fingerway Group President Charles for suspected serious economic crimes including embezzlement, misappropriation of huge public funds, commercial bribery, and forging financial documents. All evidence, including detailed flows, contracts, signed vouchers, and related audiovisual materials, are on this USB. Backups have been emailed to your bureau's public reporting inbox. Meanwhile, I turned, pointing to the controlled, manic Charles. I suspect Charles has violent tendencies and flight risk. Request police take immediate compulsory measures. Officer Grant took the USB, weighed it, his gaze lingering on my composed face momentarily, then sweeping Charles's disheveled madness, saying gravely, Ms. Lin, thank you for the report. Mr. Charles, he turned to Charles, showing credentials, we now legally summon you to the Bureau for investigation cooperation. Please come with us. No. I'm not going. It's slander. Officers. It's slander. All fake. That bitch forged it. Charles hysterically struggled, trying to shake off the extending police hand. Mr. Charles, please cooperate. Officer Grant's voice carried undeniable authority, signaling subordinates forward. The cold handcuffs clicked lightly, exceptionally piercing in the dead-silent hall. The shiny metal rings finally cuffed Charles's wrist, which moments ago was ready to sign the $100 billion contract and wield power. Time seemed to freeze at this moment. Flashes madly captured this highly symbolic scene, the once infinitely glamorous business tycoon at wealth and power's peak, now hands cuffed, hair disheveled, suit askew, face mixed with extreme anger, fear, and bewilderment, flanked by two officers, dragged like a dead dog, staggering toward the door. Behind him, the indecent scene on the massive LED screen was finally cut off in panic, leaving a glaring blue symbolizing collapse. the crowd automatically parted a path. All gazes, shocked, contemptuous, pitying, but mostly a complex exhilaration witnessing history's fall, followed that dragged, utterly fallen figure. Just as Charles was dragged to the door, about to vanish from sight, he fiercely struggled to turn back, bloodshot eyes piercing the crowd, deadly nailing me again. That look, filled with bone-deep malice, like a hell-crawled demon's final curse. I stood in place, back straight as pine. My face showed no ecstatic revenge fulfillment, nor a shred of sorrow. Only a cold, bottomless calm. Like a blizzard-ravaged wasteland, covered in thick, perennial ice. I calmly returned his destruction-filled gaze, even slightly and extremely slowly raising my hand. Not farewell. But toward him, this littered ruin, the collapsed past, and this just unveiled true reckoning future. Gently waved. Like brushing off an insignificant dust particle. The cold metal handcuff clinks, mixed with Charles's unwilling beast-like roars, were finally isolated by the heavy banquet hall doors. The moment the doors closed, it seemed to drain the last false heat from the sight, leaving only littered champagne glass shards, trampled wrinkled contract papers, and air thick with unresolvable shock, contempt, and schadenfreude. Flashes still flickered madly, like bloodthirsty moths scrambling toward me, the new focus. Countless microphones nearly poked my face, questions like dense hail with probing edges. Ms. Lin. What are your next plans? Will you take over Fingerway Group? How did you obtain Charles's crime evidence? Any illegal means? Any prior grudge between you and Ms. Vivi? Will she be prosecuted too? Reports say Fingerway stock hit circuit breaker at open. How will you handle this trust crisis? I stood at the chaos's center, behind me the massive, cold blue screen. It had just devoured a man's everything. The spotlight beams were glaringly hot, but I felt no temperature. The imprint from the small USB in my palm was the only real sensation now. Facing lenses nearly shoving into my face, I slowly raised my hand. Not to block, just a clear, calm gesture. The clamorous hall strangely quieted somewhat, leaving only camera shutters clicking. Everyone, my voice transmitted through the microphone, steady like a frozen lake surface, without a ripple. Fingerway Group is the fruit of countless employees' blood and sweat. It won't fall due to one person's moral decay. My gaze swept several familiar faces below, minor shareholders holding small stakes, deeply worried about the company's state. One silver-haired gentleman subtly nodded as my gaze passed. Based on the prenuptial property agreement with Mr. Charles, and his large-scale illegal misappropriation of company funds, I paused, letting each word clearly fall into every present ear. I have entrusted lawyers to immediately apply to the court for pre-litigation property preservation. Fingerway Group's actual control, during Mr. Charles's investigation, will legally transfer to those truly caring for its future. Below erupted suppressed exclamations and discussions. Pre-litigation preservation. This meant all Charles's equities and accounts would be frozen immediately, completely blocking any asset transfer possibilities. This was pulling the rug out. As for evidence sources, my sight skimmed those probe-hungry reporters, toned flat yet with invisible pressure. Please trust the law's justice. All evidence chains are clear, complete, withstanding any judicial scrutiny. My legal team will disclose public information timely. Now, excuse me, much remains to handle. I looked at no one else, handing the microphone to the prepared, solemn lawyer nearby. Escorted by several black-suited, alert security personnel, I turned, high heels crunching over scattered 100 billion cooperation flyers on the ground with crisp, monotonous sounds, stepping toward the side door. The heavy side door closed behind, instantly isolating all clamor and glaring flashes. The corridor's deep red carpet absorbed footsteps, leaving only the central AC's low hum. A massive, near-vacuum silence enveloped me. Ms. Lin, Lawyer Ray's voice rose nearby, with professional calm. The court has synchronously received our preservation application materials, expected feedback within an hour. Additionally, all known accounts and real estate under Charles's name are compiled, ready for submission. Representatives of key minor shareholders await you in the upstairs small conference room. I nodded, silent. The cold force sustaining me through this fatal strike seemed to quietly withdraw part upon the door closing. A deep fatigue, like cold tides, silently rose from my feet. I leaned on the cold, gold-wallpapered wall, closed my eyes, and deeply inhaled. The air still lingered with champagne and food scents from the banquet hall, now nauseating. "Ms. Lin?" Ray's voice carried subtle concern. "Fine." I opened my eyes, straightened, ruthlessly suppressing that surging vulnerability in my heart, upstairs. In the small conference room, the atmosphere was heavy. Several shareholder representatives, including the silver-haired gentleman, Edwin, sat silently, faces interwoven with anger, worry, and a hint of survivor's relief. "Ms. Lin, brilliantly done." Mr. Edwin spoke first, voice agitated with after fear. "We long suspected Charles was off. Just didn't expect such audacity, such filth. Billions in company account holes, he's mad." Now's not the time for anger. I walked to the head seat and sat, signaling the secretary to pour water. "Mr. Edwin, everyone, Charles is in, but the mess remains. Stock crash is just the start, bank loan calls, supplier runs, partner terminations. Fingerway, this ship is about to sink." My words made the room's atmosphere heavier. "Ms. Lin, what do you say?" "We'll follow you." Another middle-aged shareholder said urgently, "The company can't collapse. It's our lifetime's blood and sweat." First, my fingertips lightly tapped the smooth tabletop. "Immediately activate crisis PR plan. Led by lawyer Ray, hold afternoon press conference. Core messages 2, 1. Charles's crimes are purely personal, unrelated to Fingerway Group's operations. 2. Announce the interim management committee list led by me with you shareholders, to stabilize market confidence. Before the conference, all drafts must be personally reviewed by me." Ray nodded and noted immediately. Second, I looked at Mr. Edwin. "Mr. Edwin, you are respected and have good personal ties with several major partner bank presidents. Please step forward immediately, meet the presidents, show them our interim committee composition and initial response plan, plead for some breathing room for Fingerway. Tell them, as long as banks don't call loans, Fingerway has hope to survive, otherwise, all sink together." Mr. Edwin's expression solemn. "Good. I'll call to arrange now." Third, my gaze swept the other shareholders. "Mr. Jason, you're responsible for stabilizing the top 3 suppliers, promise priority settlement of their due payments, terms negotiable. Mr. Victor, immediately soothe employees, no core talent loss, promise full on-time wages this month, and start internal audit to reassure all staff. Any resistance, find me directly." Clear, cold instructions issued with undeniable authority. The shareholders' worries gradually replaced by a grounded sense of finding backbone. They accepted orders and left. The room left with me and Ray. "Ms. Lin," Ray pushed his glasses, "police just messaged, Charles is extremely unstable, temporarily refusing to speak. But he repeatedly roared, mentioning you. He chose words carefully, some, very vicious accusations about your personal privacy. Police hope you're mentally prepared, may need your cooperation to clarify if necessary." Personal privacy? Vicious accusations? I picked up the long cold water glass on the table, fingertips feeling the glass's cold. What else? Merely those habitual slurs when enraged, attacking me as not woman enough, not complete enough. At that moment, the conference room door was lightly knocked. My assistant Amy poked her head in, face odd. "Ms. Lin, Vivi, in the downstairs lobby, clamoring to see you. She's holding a child." Child? This word like a cold pebble into the dead silent heart lake, rippling slightly, then returning to deeper cold. A extremely sharp pain unexpectedly pierced the thick ice around my heart. Boom. Sealed memory floodgates crashed open. Pungent disinfectant smell. Cold metal exam table. Shadowless lamp's pale light. Doctor's calm, nearly cruel voice. "Ms. Lin, regrettably, severe bilateral fallopian tube blockage, natural conception possibility, negligible." Charles stood nearby then. His face expression from initial shock quickly turned to mixed disappointment, impatience, finally solidifying into cold detachment. No comfort, no hug, just irritably scratching hair, tone with detached complaint. How could this happen? So troublesome. After that, a long, humiliating medical-seeking process. Bitter Chinese medicine taste permeated the once warm home. Each cold instrument probe into the body like silent torture. And Charles, his patience and companionship, like his swelling wealth, rapidly depleted. He started returning late, body with unfamiliar perfume, eyes impatience increasingly unmasked. Stop fussing, okay? I'm tired just watching. He once roared at my silent tears after another failed check. So what without kids? We have money. What can't you have? Stop acting half-dead all day. Money. He thought money could fill everything, whitewash peace, let him righteously seek a complete woman, enjoy a complete family. Vivi, child. So that's it. This was his ultimate perfect excuse for throwing into that young girl's arms, the most righteous reason. He even got her pregnant. On the wedding bed I once fantasized and prayed for countless times in vain, they not only rolled but bred new life. Heart-like gripped by an invisible hand, hurting nearly breathless. That forcibly suppressed, a woman's deepest pain and humiliation, at this moment mixed with cold hatred, churned like volcanic lava in my chest. My fingers gripping the water glass, knuckles white from force. The cup wall's coolness couldn't cool the burning wasteland in my heart at all. Ms. Lin? Ray looked worriedly at my suddenly bloodless face. I sharply inhaled, forcibly swallowing the nearly bursting salty sweetness in my throat. The surging crimson hatred in my eyes covered by deeper, harder ice. Pain transformed, tempered, becoming sharper bones supporting me to stand straight. Let her up. My voice unusually hoarse, yet with undeniable resolve. Gaze falling outside the conference room's huge floor-to-ceiling window, where the city's skyline appeared extra cold under lead-gray clouds. Bring to the adjacent small reception room. I'd like to see what this woman, coming with trophy in arms, still wants to say. She and the child in her arms are merely part of Charles's filthy evidence. True reckoning is never just law and money. Also those wantonly trampled, dismissed, belonging to Lynn's life. When the reception room door was gently pushed open, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, back to the door. Outside, city lights lit sequentially like a fallen star river. The glass reflected my blurred shadow, a woman in black suit, back straight like an unsheathed sword. Ms. Lin. Vivi's voice came from behind, with obvious tremble and cower, utterly different from the coquettish wanton in the surveillance. I didn't turn immediately, continuing to look outside. Let that child-holding woman endure a few more seconds of this invisible pressure. This was basic psychological tactic, who speaks first loses initiative. Please, give me 5 minutes. Her voice carried a sob, accompanied by the infant's weak hums. Infant. This word like a sharp thorn, again stabbing my heart's softest part. I deeply inhaled, slowly turning. The Vivi before me was utterly different from the alluring mistress in surveillance. She wore simple t-shirt and jeans, hair messily in ponytail, face paper pale, eyes swollen like rotten peaches. In arms, an infant wrapped in light blue swaddle, looking at most 2 or 3 months old. The child's small face wrinkled, restlessly squirming. Sit. I pointed to the opposite sofa, voice calm without any emotion. Vivi like a startled rabbit, cautiously sat, body leaning forward, as if ready to kneel any time. Her eyes dared not meet mine, only staring at her trembling knees. Ms. Lin, I know I have no face to see you, but the child is innocent. Get to the point directly. I interrupted, walking to sit opposite, hands folded on knees. My time is precious. Vivi sharply lifted head, tears instantly rolling. Please spare us. Those money, houses, cars. I'll return all. I want nothing. Just beg you not to sue me, the child can't be without a mom. I coldly watched her collapse, heart without ripple. Crocodile tears. When climbing Charles's bed initially, she didn't think the child would lack a dad. You got one thing wrong, I said slowly, each word sharp like ice awls. Deciding prosecution isn't me, it's the law. Your participation in misappropriating public funds, accepting bribes, assisting forged accounts, each is criminal. As for the child, my gaze first fell on that small swaddle bundle, heart uncontrollably contracting. He is indeed innocent, but that's not an immunity pass. Vivi shook all over, suddenly thudding to knees, the infant startled by her sudden move into loud cries. Ms. Lynn. Please. I'm willing to testify. I can point out all Charles's crimes. As long as you show mercy. I can tell you a secret. A big secret about Charles. Secret? I slightly raised brow, signaling continue. Vivi wiped tears, voice extremely low with morbid excitement. Charles has long secretly transferred assets abroad. He has secret accounts in Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Total over 300 million USD. He also forged your signature, using shell companies under your name to launder money. He planned long ago, once this 100 billion deal signed, to divorce you, take the money and fly far. My pupils slightly contracted. Though I guess Charles left backhands, 300 million USD exceeded my estimate. As for forged signature, cold laugh in heart, this was unexpected gain, enough to add years to his sentence. Evidence? I asked calmly. Vivi nodded eagerly, fumbling from the infant swaddle a small USB. All, here. I secretly backed up. Charles doesn't know I have this. She offered it like treasure, face with twisted hope. This, enough to exchange for me and the child's safety? I didn't take the USB immediately, scrutinizing her calculation-filled face. How ironic, hours ago she was tumbling with Charles on my wedding bed, hours later, she unhesitatingly sells him out for self-preservation. Charles's taste, laughably poor. Not enough. I finally spoke, voice cold like Siberian wind, but if you're willing to testify in court, cooperate with police investigation, I can consider leniency in sentencing recommendation. Vivi's face instantly ashed, she slumped to the ground, the infant in arms crying louder. That sharp cry like a dull knife, repeatedly cutting my nerves. Child. She murmured, eyes glazed, what about him later? Charles jailed. I might too. That's your problem. I stood, looking down at her. Adults always pay for their choices. I reached for the USB still warm from infant, turned toward door. The instant fingers touched handle, behind came Vivi's hysterical scream. You think you won? Lynn. You eggless hen. Charles was right, you're a cold-blooded monster. Deserve no kids. Deserve your husband ditching you. Every word like poison-quenched arrow, precisely shooting my heart's most vulnerable part. My back stiffened an instant, but soon normal. No turn, no anger, I just calmly twisted the handle, in the infant's heartrending cries, walked out without looking back. In the corridor, Ray waited anxiously. Seeing me out, he stepped forward quickly. Ms. Lynn, court approved our pre-litigation preservation. All assets under Charles frozen. Also, police just notified they found in Charles's private safe. Wait. I interrupted, raising the small USB in hand, look at this first. Provided by Vivi, allegedly evidence of Charles's overseas asset transfers. Ray's eyes lit, immediately taking the USB, inserting into his laptop. Seconds later, his expression from surprise to shock, my God, this is more detailed than what we have. Swiss bank account details, Cayman Islands shell company structures, even, wait, what's this? He sharply widened eyes, Ms. Lynn, there's a personal accident insurance policy. Beneficiary is Charles, insured, is you. My blood instantly froze. Ray's voice turned extremely serious, coverage up to 50 million USD. And, policy date 3 months ago, just a week before your last business trip. Ms. Lynn, this is no coincidence. 3 months ago, that accident brake failure. Then I thought car old and worn, now recalling, that Mercedes bought less than a year. A chill shot from feet to spine. Charles not only betrayed, used me, he wanted, to kill me? Heart pounded violently in chest, but my expression still calm as water. anger and fear compressed into harder determination. I reached to close the laptop, voice light almost inaudible, hand all this to police. Attempted intentional murder, enough for extra years in prison. Ray nodded solemnly, quickly packed files to leave. At that moment, my phone suddenly vibrated. Screen showed unknown number. Hello? I pressed answer. Is this Ms. Lynn? A stranger's male voice, with businesslike indifference. This is Municipal Hospital ER. Your patient Vivi just arrived, critical condition. Her registered emergency contact is you. I stunned. What? Vivi? What happened? Preliminary judgment: acute drug poisoning. She left a suicide note, designated for you. Also, a 2-month-old male infant with her, currently under nurse care. Please come soon. Later words I couldn't hear. Ears only blood-rushing roar. Drug poisoning? Suicide note? She actually, suicide? Ms. Lynn? What happened? Ray asked worriedly. I mechanically hung up, voice drifting like from far. Vivi, suicided. In hospital rescue. Ray gasped, my God. The child? Child fine. I answered subconsciously, then sharply realized something, lifting head to meet Ray's shocked gaze. That child. That innocent, just 2-month-old, recently crying in Swat a little life. Now, he's orphan. Father soon jailed, mother life-death unknown. And legally, as Charles's legal wife, I am surprisingly this child's current only guardian? A whirl of dizziness. Fate, this cruel scriptwriter, at this moment showed its most ironic stroke. That child I dreamed of but could never have, now absurdly shoved into my life. To hospital. I heard myself say, voice unnaturally calm, immediately. Hospital corridors seemed endless. Disinfectant smell mixed with despair breath-drilled nostrils, evoking deepest painful memory fragments. Those years, I shuttled such corridors alone, from one clinic to another, from hope to despair. ER red light still on. At nurse station, a young nurse held the infant gently rocking, face full of helplessness. Child cried red-faced, voice already hoarse. Ms. Lynn? An older head nurse came up, holding an envelope. This is Ms. Vivi's suicide note. Before taking drugs, she specifically instructed, only to you. I took the thin envelope, fingers surprisingly trembling. Opened, inside only a wrinkled note paper, with scrawled writing like hastily done. Lynn, I know you don't believe me, but the child is truly innocent. Charles never intended to acknowledge him, he just wanted to use the child to force my silence. Those evidences were my last chips, but I still lost. Please, don't let my child go to orphanage. You can hate me, but please don't punish him. He's so small, knows nothing. An unworthy mother. The note had several water-smudged spots, unknown if tears or else. I crumpled the paper into a ball, clenched in palm, turned to look at the infant in nurse's arms. At this moment he just stopped crying, opening wet big eyes looking over. Those eyes unusually clean, like 2 unpolluted springs. In an instant, I seemed to see myself in mirror years ago, that little girl abandoned at orphanage door, also helplessly gazing this cold world. Vivi's condition? My voice dry unlike my own. Head nurse shook head, stomach pumped, but ingested drug dose too large, and discovered too late. Doctors still trying, but best prepare mentally. Prepare? I stared at that small infant, heart like gripped hard by invisible hand. He's about to lose mother, like me back then. And his father, that despicable man, not even worthy as father. Child checked? Health how? Except slight dehydration, other indicators normal. Head nurse hesitated, but, we found this in Ms. Vivi's bag. She handed a folded paper. Unfolded, a paternity test report. Charles and Vivi's names prominent, and last conclusion line like knife into eyes. Via DNA comparison, exclude Charles as XXX, infant name, S biological father. I sharply lifted head, shocked, speechless. Not Charles's child? Then why? As if seeing my question, head nurse low-voiced, Ms. Vivi said one sentence when conscious, she said tricked him, he deserves it. So that's it. A elaborate scam. Vivi used fake pregnancy to bind Charles, and Charles for this non-existent heir, risked all, ultimately doomed. How ironic, how pathetic. ER door suddenly opened, doctor came out, removed mask, shook head, sorry, we tried our best. World became unusually quiet this moment. I looked at the unknowing little life in nurse's arms, he sucking own little fist, emitting light smack sounds. This child just lost mother, doesn't even know what he lost. Ms. Lin, about the child's placement. Head nurse hesitated. I closed eyes. Memories surged like tides, orphanage cold iron beds, other kids mocking looks, forever unsatiating meals, countless nightmare-woken nights. That bone-deep loneliness and helplessness, I know better than anyone. Handle procedures first. I heard myself say, voice light like sigh, I'll handle. 3 months later, early spring sun through floor-to-ceiling window sprinkled in, laying golden patches on floor. I sat in office, front piled with pending signature files. Fungruway Group, after that storm, not only didn't fall, but under my lead completed asset restructuring, stock rebounding to higher than pre-incident levels. Knock sounded. Enter. Ray pushed door in, face with unconcealable joy, Ms. Lin, good news. Charles's case just sentenced, 15 years imprisonment. All illegal gains fully recovered. And due to that personal insurance and brake failure evidence, attempted intentional murder charge established. I nodded, face without much joy. This long revenge finally ended, but heart without imagined exhilaration, only a dust-settled calm. Additionally, about that child's adoption procedures, all completed. Ray handed a folder, legally, he's now your son. I took the file, fingertips gently stroking the name now officially Leo. Over 3 months, this unexpectedly intruding little guy, with his purest smiles and unreserved dependence, bit by bit melted my heart's hard ice. Right, Ray walked to door then turned, Charles requests to see you once, says important matter to discuss. You see? No. I answered without lifting head, voice calm and resolute. Past is past. Now I have more important responsibilities and concerns. Off work home, push door, milk sent assaults. Nanny Grace holding little Yang Yang playing in living room, seeing me immediately smiles, Ms. Lin back. Yang Yang so good today, kept staring at door. Little guy hears voice, immediately turns head, agate blue big eyes brighten, waving little hands calling, corner still with crystal drool. I put down bag, walk over take him. He immediately nestles into my arms, little head rubbing my shoulder, emitting satisfied hums. This unreserved trust quietly softens some heart corner. Good day today, little son? I ask softly, kissing his milk-scented little cheek. He giggles, little hand grabs my hair strand, force light, yet inescapable. Like fate. Once I thought my life destined a lonely trek. Until this little life unrelated by blood appeared, with his purest existence teaching me unconditional love and acceptance. Outside window, setting sun sinks west, last golden ray through glass, pulling our embracing shadows very long. At shadow and light's boundary, new story just begins.